It was deep into the night. The clock was crawling toward midnight. Outside, a gale-force wind was howling, and the leaves of the trees were trembling as if gripped by an unknown terror. Streaks of lightning ripped through the sky every few moments, followed by ear-splitting cracks of thunder. On a night like this, no sane person would dare step outside. But tonight, my luck seemed to be written differently. My name is Ethan. I'm a photographer by profession. Today, I had driven out to a remote part of rural Blackwood to capture shots of an old, abandoned Victorian mansion. They say the estate is over a century old, with mysterious legends hidden in every corner. By the time I finished my shoot and started back, night had already fallen. The back roads out here are treacherous even in good weather, and with this storm, they were a nightmare. Near a crumbling old bridge, my car suddenly died. I tried everything, but the engine wouldn't turn over. No signal on my phone. Nothing but dense woods and darkness surrounding me. My only hope was the dim glow of my headlights, but even those were fading fast. With no other choice, I grabbed my flashlight and started walking, hoping to find some kind of shelter. After about 10 minutes, I saw a faint glimmer of light in the distance. A house, perhaps, or a cottage. Driven by hope, I quickened my pace. But as I got closer to the source of the light, a chill settled deep in my chest. This was no ordinary house. It was a massive, ancient mansion. Its walls were covered in thick moss. Its windows were shattered, and the doors hung open like the jaws of a skeleton. The grounds were overgrown with weeds. It looked like no human had stepped foot here in decades. But where was that light coming from? Who could possibly be living in this desolate, abandoned place? Even though I was terrified, the storm left me with no alternative. I gathered my courage and approached the main gate. It was rusted shut, creaking loudly as I pushed it open. As soon as I stepped inside, a sudden, icy gust of wind brushed past me. It felt as if someone had just walked right through me. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw a cavernous hallway, furniture covered in thick layers of dust, cobwebs everywhere, and bats fluttering in the rafters. In the corner of the hall, a grand staircase led upward. The light was coming from a room at the top of those stairs. I began to climb. Every step felt like it was whispering an ancient, dark secret. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight, a sound that felt loud enough to wake some sleeping entity within the house. Reaching the top, I found a long, dark corridor. Rows of closed doors lined both sides. Only one door at the very end was slightly ajar. The light was spilling out from there. Slowly, I moved toward it. I pushed the door open, and what I saw made the world slip from beneath my feet. In the center of the room stood an old table. A single candle flickered on it, and in its pale light sat an elderly woman. Her hair was stark white, her face deeply wrinkled, and her eyes, they had an unnaturally bright, piercing glow. She looked at me and let out a strange, unsettling smile. That smile sent a wave of ice straight down my spine. Then she whispered. Hearing the old woman's whisper, my blood ran cold. She said, "Come in, child. Come inside. It isn't right to be out in a storm like this." There was a strange, haunting warmth in her voice, a kindness that somehow overrode my fear and drew me into the room. I stepped inside with hesitant feet. The room was large but sparsely furnished, just an antique bed, a heavy wardrobe, and that weathered table. The walls were damp, and thick cobwebs hung from every corner. The woman gestured toward a broken wooden chair, inviting me to sit. As I sat down, she handed me a glass of water. The water helped steady my nerves. She looked at me, her piercing eyes fixed on mine, and asked, "What brings you into these woods so late, son? Have you lost your way?" I told her about my car trouble and my mission to photograph the old Victorian mansion. Hearing this, she let out a long, heavy sigh. "This estate is cursed," she whispered. "Many years ago, a tragedy struck this house. The master's only daughter, the beautiful Madeline, fell in love with a poor young man, but her father could never accept their bond. He locked Madeline away in this very room and had the young man brutally murdered. Consumed by grief, Madeline took her own life right here." A shiver raced down my spine as she continued. "Since then, strange things have begun to happen in this house." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I gathered my courage and asked, "Who are you? And how is it that you still live here?" She gave a faint, melancholy smile. "I was the old maid of this household. After Madeline's death, everyone fled in terror. But I couldn't leave her. I stayed behind to pray for her soul's peace." 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Was she truly human, or was she Madeline's ghost? Why were her eyes so unnaturally bright? And how did she survive alone in this desolate palace? I was about to ask more, but she suddenly cut me off. "It is very late, son. You should rest now. We will talk more in the morning." She led me to a different room. It was small but surprisingly tidy, with an old bed covered in clean sheets. I lay down, but sleep fell a million miles away. Her words echoed in my ears. Madeline's tragic end, the cursed mansion, and this mysterious woman. An overwhelming sense of dread clouded my mind. Outside, the storm raged on. The whistling wind rattled the window panes, and flashes of lightning illuminated the room in jagged bursts. Suddenly, I felt it, a presence, as if someone or something was standing just outside my door. A bone-chilling sensation spread through my entire body. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the morning to come. But the night felt like it would never end. As the night grew deeper, my terror only intensified. It felt as if an otherworldly presence was lurking in every corner of the room. Even though I lay there with my eyes tightly shut, my ears were painfully alert. The howling wind outside, the rustling of leaves, and the constant flash of lightning created a truly haunting atmosphere. Suddenly, a low, muffled groaning sound reached my ears. It seemed to be coming from inside the room itself. I was too paralyzed with fear to even open my eyes. After a few moments, the sound stopped. I summoned every bit of courage I had and opened my eyes. The room was pitch black. Then, a flash of lightning illuminated the space for a fraction of a second, and in that burst of light, what I saw made my heart stop. A shadowy figure was standing by the window. The figure was faint, but I could clearly make out the silhouette of a woman. Her hair was loose and disheveled, and her eyes, they seemed to be glowing. I tried to scream, but no sound came out my throat. My body felt completely numb. The shadow began to move slowly toward me. Each step she took seemed to sync with the frantic pounding of my heart. I closed my eyes again, praying with all my might that this was just a nightmare. When I opened my eyes again, the shadow was gone. The room was shrouded in that thick, oppressive darkness once more. I was gasping for air, my entire body drenched in sweat. Was that truly Madeline's ghost? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but my soul refused to believe it. I sat up on the bed. I felt that staying in this room was no longer safe. I wanted to get out, but when I looked toward the door, I saw it was shut. I tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. Panic surged through me. Was I trapped in this mansion? I began to pound on the door, screaming for the old woman. but there was no response. My cries seemed to bounce off the massive walls of the manor and echo back at me. It felt as if I were all alone in this vast palace. Suddenly, I remembered what the woman had said. Madeline was kept prisoner in this very room. Was I now a prisoner in the same room where Madeline died? A new kind of terror took root in my mind. If Madeline's spirit truly haunted this room, what would she do to me? I curled up in a corner of the room. My flashlight had fallen from my hand at some point and was lost in the dark. I sat there in the shadows, waiting for morning to come, but the night seemed endless. Every moment felt like an eternity. Outside, the storm grew even more violent. The whistling wind and the blinding lightning only fed my fear. Suddenly, an icy gust of air brushed against my skin. It felt as if someone was standing right next to me, right over me. I closed my eyes in terror. I felt like my final moments had arrived. My body was trembling with pure terror. I sat there with my eyes clamped shut, chanting prayers under my breath. It felt as if dozens of invisible hands were reaching out, brushing against me. A cold, spectral touch grazed my cheek, and I felt someone or something whisper into my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but a muffled, agonized wail began to ring in my ears. It was a cry that sounded like a lifetime of suppressed pain and humiliation. I summoned the courage to open my eyes. The room was still dark, but now I saw it clearly, a faint, ethereal light glowing in the center of the room. The light began to take a human shape. As the silhouette grew distinct, I saw her, a young woman. She was wearing a vintage, tattered gown. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her eyes held a depth of sorrow I had never seen before. This had to be Madeline. Madeline's spirit stood there, staring at me. There was no anger in her gaze, no hatred, only boundless suffering and a haunting question. She reached her hand out toward me, as if she were trying to say something, but no words came from her lips. Only that muffled wail, growing louder and more intense. I sat there, frozen like a statue, paralyzed by the unknown. Suddenly, Madeline's form began to flicker and tremble, and a swirling vortex of shadows formed around her. Within that vortex, a vision appeared. I saw a young man being brutally beaten. He was screaming, blood pouring from his wounds. I realized then, this was the poor young man the master of the estate had murdered. Witnessing this, Madeline let out a scream of pure agony. It was a sound so piercing it felt like it was tearing through my very chest. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and Madeline's spirit turned back to me. Now, her eyes held a new plea. She was desperate to make me understand something, but she couldn't. I looked at her and finally found my voice. "What do you want? What are you trying to tell me?" At my words, her form shuddered violently, and I saw what looked like tears of light streaming down her face. I understood then. Madeline wanted her story to be known. She wanted justice for the humiliation and the horror she had endured. But how? I'm just an ordinary man. How could I possibly help her? I looked at her again and whispered, "I want to help you, but how?" As I spoke, her form began to fade, slowly dissolving into the air. The room plunged back into that suffocating darkness. I was alone again. It felt as if I had been pulled into the heart of a massive, dark mystery. Madeline's restless soul was reaching out to me, and somehow I had to find the answers. I stood up from the bed. My fear had subsided slightly, replaced by a new, burning resolve. I would help Madeline. I would find a way to bring her soul peace. But first, I had to get out of this room. I walked toward the door, and this time it swung open. I stepped out into the corridor. It was still pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight and began to walk cautiously. I could feel it now. In every shadow, in every corner of this mansion, Madeline was there. Walking back through the corridor, I found myself in the main hall once again. It was still draped in darkness and absolute silence. I moved toward the room where the old woman had been. The door was open. I peeked inside. The room was empty. She was gone. A new question burned in my mind. Where did she go? Was she truly a human being, or was she, like Madeline, some kind of spectral entity? I stood in the center of the hall, looking around. It felt as if every object in this mansion was trying to whisper something to me. I began to examine the walls with my flashlight. Old portraits hung there, covered in thick dust. I wiped them clean as best as I could. In one frame, I saw Madeline. Beside her stood a handsome young man. This must be the poor lover whom the master had murdered. In another portrait, I saw the master of the estate. His face looked cruel, filled with arrogance. Beside him stood an elderly woman. Her face looked hauntingly familiar. I leaned in closer. Yes, it was the same old woman who had given me shelter. So, she really was a housemaid. But where had she vanished to? I went back into the woman's room and began a thorough search. Under the bed, I discovered an old wooden chest. It was locked. I tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. Then, my eyes caught a small box on the bedside table. It was open, and inside lay a small, rusted key. I picked it up. When I unlocked the chest, my heart skipped a beat. Inside were stacks of old documents, some antique jewelry, and a diary. I picked up the diary. It was Madeline's handwriting. I began to read. On the first page, it said, "Asterisk, my life is cursed. I cannot have the one I love. My father has imprisoned me in this room. I do not know what fate awaits me." Asterisk, every page was filled with Madeline's agony and torment. She wrote about her struggle for love and how her father had systematically destroyed her life. On the very last page, she had written, "Asterisk, I can't take it anymore. My life is meaningless. I want freedom from this pain. I know that after I die, my soul will haunt this house. I will have my revenge. I will let no one live in peace within these walls." Asterisk, a shiver ran through my entire body. As I closed the book, Madeline really had taken her own life, and her spirit was indeed wandering this mansion. But where was the old woman? Did she know Madeline's ghost was here? Was she trying to help me, or did she have some other dark motive? I placed the diary back inside the chest. I realized then that the mystery of this palace was far deeper than I imagined. I decided I had to find the old woman. Asterisk, asterisk, Alara, asterisk, asterisk. She surely knew more than she was letting on. I stepped out of the room and began to descend the stairs cautiously. It felt as if every shadow in the mansion was following my every move. I made my way back down to the main hall. By now, the fear had been replaced by a cold, sharp curiosity and a burning resolve. I was determined to find the old woman, Alara. She undoubtedly knew the darkest secrets of this manor. I began to inspect every inch of the hall. I felt certain there was more hidden within these walls than I had yet discovered. In one corner, I spotted a massive, ancient wardrobe. It was blanketed in dust and draped in thick cobwebs. I tried to pull the doors open, but it was locked tight. I searched the immediate area for a key. Suddenly, my eyes landed on a small side table. On it sat an antique candle holder, and right beside it, a small, rusted key. I snatched it up. As I turned the key in the lock, the wardrobe groaned with a piercing, metallic screech. Inside were piles of moth-eaten vintage clothes and several old books. I pushed the garments aside and began leafing through the books. They were all centuries old, their pages brittle and yellow with age. One book, in particular, caught my eye. The title read, Secrets of the Blackwood Estate. I pulled the book out. As I opened it, a folded, ancient map slipped out into my hands. It was a blueprint of the entire mansion. The map detailed numerous secret tunnels and hidden chambers I hadn't known existed. I studied it intensely. My finger traced a line representing a tunnel that ran directly beneath the main entrance of the manor. A thought struck me. Perhaps this was how the old woman had vanished. I began searching for the entrance to that tunnel. According to the map, it was hidden in a specific corner of the hall. I went to that spot and began examining the wall. It was weathered, covered in damp moss and grime. I felt along the stones carefully. Suddenly, my hand pressed against a concealed stone button. The moment I pushed it, a section of the wall slid back with a heavy thud, revealing a dark, yawning tunnel. Pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The passage was narrow, the walls slick with moisture. A biting, cold draft blew through the tunnel, carrying with it the faint, pungent smell of decay. I walked cautiously deeper into the earth. The tunnel felt endless, and I had no idea where it led. It felt as if I were stepping into another world entirely. On the walls of the tunnel, I saw ancient murals, drawings depicting the history of the estate and its darkest, most hidden mysteries. I kept moving, scanning the images. Suddenly, a muffled groaning sound reached my ears. It was coming from deep within the passage. I thought to myself, Elara must be in here. I quickened my pace. At the very end of the tunnel, I came across a heavy iron door. It was locked. I threw my weight against it, but it wouldn't budge. I felt certain the old woman was on the other side of that door. I began pounding on the iron surface, screaming her name, begging her to answer, but there was only silence. A terrifying realization washed over me. I might have walked straight into a trap. I was stuck in a pitch-black tunnel with an unknown horror looming. I didn't know what to do next. Standing before that iron door, I felt a wave of utter despair. It felt like I was trapped in a never-ending labyrinth. The tunnel was pitch black, and an unknown terror seemed to breathe down my neck. I didn't know what to do. Then, I suddenly remembered there was another small key in that wooden chest. I raced back and opened it, but I quickly realized that was a key to the wardrobe. There was no key here for the tunnel door. I returned to the iron door once more. This time, I examined it with even more focus. In one corner, I spotted a tiny pinhole. It was so small that seeing what lay beyond was nearly impossible. I angled my flashlight toward the hole. As the light pierced the darkness inside, my entire body went numb, and I was staring back at me. It was Elara's eye. I saw terror, desperation, and a silent plea within it. She looked like she was trying to scream a warning to me, but no sound came out. I leaned against the door and shouted, "Elara, are you in there? What happened? Open the door." At the sound of my voice, a tear rolled down from that eye. She whispered something, but I couldn't hear it over the whistling wind of the tunnel and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I pressed my ear against the metal. This time, I heard it clearly. She gasped out, the key is in Madeline's room." Madeline's room. I bolted out of the tunnel. I had a lead. I sprinted back up to Madeline's chambers. The room was still cloaked in shadows. I scanned every inch with my flashlight. Under the bed, inside the wardrobe, the desk drawers, everywhere, nothing. No key. I slumped onto the bed, defeated. I felt like I was chasing a ghost, walking a path that led nowhere. There was no key here. What could she have meant? Then my light caught something at the head of the bed. There was a tiny, recessed niche in the headboard. It was covered in thick dust, and tucked inside was a small, ornate box. I grabbed the box. When I opened it, my eyes widened. Inside lay a small, rusted iron key. It was old, weathered by time. This had to be it. The key to the tunnel. I didn't waste a second. I ran back to the tunnel, reached the iron door, and jammed the key into the lock. With a sharp, metallic screech, the lock turned and the door swung open. As I stepped inside, my heart nearly stopped beating. Beyond the door was a small, cramped stone chamber. In the center of the room lay Ilara. Her body was motionless, her eyes frozen open. A strange, haunting smile lingered on her lips, as if she had died holding on to a secret she couldn't share. Clutched tightly in her hand was an old, yellowed letter. I gently took it from her grasp. The letter was in Madeline's handwriting. It read, "My dear Ilara, I know how much you love me. I know the sacrifices you've made. I know you want to avenge me, but I do not want you to suffer any longer. I want you to find peace. After I am gone, leave this house. This place is cursed. If you stay, it will consume you too." Asterisk. As I finished reading, tears blurred my vision. I realized in the depth of Ilara's devotion to Madeline. She had sacrificed her entire life for her. But why had she come to this hidden chamber? And how did she die here? I felt then that the mystery of this estate was far from over. Ilara's lifeless body and Madeline's letter left me drowning in deep thought. Why had the old woman come into this tunnel? And how did she die here? In the letter, Madeline had begged her to leave this house, yet she stayed. Did she want to seek Madeline's revenge? But how? And why did she lead me to that key with her final breath? I read the letter clutched in Ilara's hand once more. Madeline had written, asterisk, "I know you want to avenge me." That single line sparked a new question. Did Madeline know that Ilara would seek vengeance? And if she did, why tell her to leave? Was it Madeline herself who sought revenge, and Ilara was merely her accomplice? The mysteries of this estate were becoming a tangled web. I examined Ilara's body closely. There were no marks of violence, no wounds. It looked as if she had passed away naturally. But why here, in this desolate, hidden chamber? And what was the meaning of that strange, haunting smile on her face? I began to scan the small room. It was cramped, containing only an old table and a single chair. A candle flickered on the table, its pale light illuminating an ancient book. I picked it up. It was a book of dark occultism and rituals. The pages were yellowed and brittle, covered in bizarre symbols and incantations. I began to read. The book was filled with ancient spells. I realized then Ilara had been using the occult to try and seek Madeline's revenge. But did she succeed? Or did death claim her before she could finish? On the very last page, there was a peculiar incantation, a spell to summon a spirit. Beneath the text, it was written, "By reciting this, the restless soul shall awaken and the fires of vengeance shall be ignited." Asterisk, a shiver raced through me. Had Ilara been trying to summon Madeline's ghost? And had the ritual cost her life? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. If Madeline's spirit truly awakened, what would happen? Would she turn her wrath on me as well? I slammed the book shut and shoved it back onto the table. This tunnel was no longer safe. I left Ilara's body where it lay. It felt right. This chamber was her final sanctuary. I locked the iron door and hurried back toward the main hall. Once there, I went straight back to the wardrobe and grabbed a book titled Asterisk, Secrets of the Blackwood Estate. As I opened it, a small scrap of paper fluttered out. It was Madeline's handwriting again. The note read, Asterisk, my dear Ethan, I know you'll come to help me. I know you want to avenge me, but I do not want you to suffer for my sake. I want you to find peace. Leave this house after I am gone. This place is cursed. If you stay, evil will befall you. I stood there, paralyzed with shock. How did Madeline know I was coming? And how? How did she know my name was Ethan? We had never met. My mind raced. Could she have read my thoughts? Was she trying to warn me of a danger far greater than I could imagine? I tucked the note into my pocket. The mystery of the Blackwood estate was deeper and darker than any photograph could capture. But I was determined now. I wouldn't leave until I solved this. I began to search every corner of the mansion, feeling certain that something else, something massive, was still hidden in plain sight. That second note from Madeline left me more confused than ever. How did she know my name? And why was she so desperate for me to leave this house? I began to wonder, did Madeline know my arrival long before I got here? Or could her spectral form see through the fabric of time into the future? Was this warning truly for my own good? Or was there another motive hidden behind her words? I began a fresh search through every single room of the mansion. I felt certain that Madeline must have left behind one final clue. I examined every wall, every piece of rotting furniture. Finally, in the master's primary bedroom, the very place where Madeline had been kept prisoner, I discovered a hidden compartment behind a large, antique mirror. The compartment was small, and inside sat a weathered wooden chest. It was locked, and I didn't have a key. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Then, I suddenly remembered a strange symbol mentioned in Madeline's diary. It was a rose. I began searching the surface of the chest for that specific mark. In one corner, I found a small, faint carving of a rose. It was dim, but I knew instantly it was the symbol from the diary. As soon as I pressed my finger against it, there was a sharp click, and the lid of the chest sprang open. My eyes widened at what lay inside. There was a vintage dress, some antique jewelry, and a small dagger. The dress was Madeline's, and the jewelry belonged to her as well. But why the dagger? And why had she hidden these items here of all places? I picked up the dagger. It was incredibly sharp, and I noticed dark, dried stains of blood on the blade. A chilling thought struck me. Perhaps this was a weapon Madeline used to take her own life. But why? Madeline wanted revenge for her love. Why would she simply kill herself? I felt there was a deeper mystery behind her death. I picked up the dress, and in one of the pockets, I found a small scrap of paper. It was Madeline's handwriting again. It read, my dear Ethan, I know you'll come to avenge me, but I do not want you to suffer for my sake. I want you to find peace. Leave this house after I am gone. This place is cursed. Evil will find you here. I have already taken my revenge on my father. I killed him with this very dagger. I know my soul will wander this house forever. I don't want you to endure the pain I have. Just pray for me. My entire body shuddered as I finished reading. Madeline didn't just commit suicide. She had murdered her father, and only after that did she turn the blade on herself. So why did the old woman tell me Madeline had killed herself out of grief? Why was Alara so hell-bent on seeking a revenge that had already been taken? It occurred to me then, perhaps Alara never knew Madeline's dark secret. She likely believed Madeline was a tragic victim of suicide. All her years of struggle and occult rituals, were they all for nothing? I placed the items back into the hidden compartment. The mystery of this estate finally felt clear to me. Madeline had exacted her own bloody vengeance before ending her life. Her spirit was wandering these halls not just in grief, but as a protector, making sure no one else suffered the fate she had. I closed the compartment. I felt like my work here was done. I had brought the truth of Madeline's soul to light. But as I turned to leave, a new, chilling question arose in my mind. Would I actually be able to leave this house? Or would Madeline's spirit keep me trapped here with her forever? After reading Madeline's final letter, a strange sense of peace washed over me. The fires of revenge had finally burned out, and Madeline's soul was perhaps finally free. But what about my own freedom? Could I truly leave this cursed mansion? Or would Madeline's spirit keep me bound to this place forever? I stepped out of the bedroom. Every corner of the estate now felt familiar to me. Every wall, every decaying piece of furniture seemed to be whispering Madeline's story. I walked toward the main hall. Outside, the storm was still raging, but it felt as though the wind had lost its violent edge. Reaching the hall, I looked toward the main entrance. The heavy doors were standing open. I walked toward them with slow, steady steps. In that moment, I felt it. Madeline's spirit brushed past me one last time, whispering a single breath into the cold air. "Go! You are free." I stepped through the gates. The darkness of the night hadn't fully lifted, but I felt as if I could see the first light of a new dawn. I quickened my pace. It felt as though a massive weight had been lifted from my soul. Just as I crossed the boundary of the estate, I felt someone calling out to me from behind. I stopped and turned around. A bolt of lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the mansion for a split second. In that flash of light, what I saw made my heart stop. There, on the roof of the Victorian mansion, stood Madeline. She was wearing that same vintage dress, her hair flowing in the wind, and on her face was a strange, beautiful smile. She waved her hand at me, as if saying a final goodbye. I looked back at her and smiled. I knew then Madeline was truly at peace. I began to walk again. It felt like the start of a brand new life. The mystery of the Blackwood estate would be etched in my mind forever. Madeline's tragedy, Alara's sacrifice, and the scorching fire of revenge. It was an experience I could never forget. By the time I reached my car, the storm had completely vanished. The sky was clear, and a bright moon had emerged. My car shimmered under the pale moonlight. I got in and turned the key. The engine roared to life instantly. I drove away, heading back toward civilization. I felt like a different person. The mansion had taught me so much. I realized there's a very thin line between love and revenge, and once that line is crossed, life becomes a curse. When I reached the nearby town, the sun was beginning to rise. The locals looked at me in shock. They had assumed I was lost or killed in the storm. I told them the story of the mansion. They listened in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. I took out my camera and began scrolling through the photos I had taken. They captured both the haunting beauty and the dark mystery of the estate. I realized then, these photos were the greatest work of my life. I spent the rest of my years telling Madeline's story to whoever would listen. I told them how powerful love can be, and how terrifying revenge can become. I told them of the suffering of restless souls, and how they eventually find their path to light. The Blackwood Mansion still stands today, but its secrets are no longer hidden in the shadows. Madeline's soul is finally at rest, and her story will live on in the hearts of people forever. And I know, whenever I pass by those old iron gates, Madeline's spirit will be there, whispering softly in the wind, "Go, you are free."